the intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
Welcome everybody back to another Strange New Worlds review where we go over episode 3, Ghost of Illyria. So far, Strange New Worlds has definitely been one of my favorite Star Trek series. And how it's starting out, honestly, and this is not meant to be shade thrown at previous, but look, this is starting off better than almost any other Star Trek series ever has. We definitely know that there's a theme of Star Trek series starting off bad in season 1, and that has not been the case so far through 3 episodes. I've really enjoyed it, and I think as the new writing teams of Star Trek get more and more familiar, we're seeing more and more of all of the stories getting. Discovery, one of the biggest complaints was season 1, just the writing felt awash. It was all over the place, and it's gotten better. Took to season 2-ish before I really liked it, mostly because of Pike, and then season 3, season 4 were good. Lower Decks, though, started off a little bit stronger. Picard, even though not the best Trek in my opinion, still started off better. And now Strange New Worlds coming off with just flying out of the gates, man. They're like a Kentucky Derby winner over here. So let's take a look at what's all going down, break it down, and I think that's about it. We're gonna go over every little detail, which in another one, these episodes are about an hour long, but man, are they covering a lot of detail and giving us a ton of story, which I absolutely love. One thing I'll say is, hey, if you enjoy, join our Discord where we can talk about this stuff in person, or if you just want to ask me questions about my Star Trek knowledge, say I don't know everything. It's a lot of Star Trek, and I always love learning more about my favorite sci-fi show. So let's start with that. You get this picture right here. We are visiting the Illyrians. Another shout out to Star Trek Enterprise, by the way. This is the 3rd episode in a row where we have a direct reference to Star Trek Enterprise, or something that we saw in Enterprise, which makes sense because this is happening after Enterprise, as was the early version of Discovery. So we're kind of getting some familiarity, some of those storylines, which is really nice to see. The Illyrians were outcasts of the Federation, even though some of them wanted to join the Federation because they were very big on genetic augmentation. Obviously, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know that would be a big issue because of the whole Khan thing. So we're visiting an ancient Illyrian planet that no longer has any survivors on it. So we're going to, of course, go down at the last potential minute because we got to investigate. And there's an ion storm coming. You can even see it in the background of this shot. By the way, spoilers. I don't know why I didn't mention that in the first 5 minutes. Obvious spoilers, but sometimes people still get fussy. Like, yo, you didn't tell me we were going to look at the spoilers. So you can see in the background, which I also got to make a quick comment about the uniforms. I want this jacket so freaking bad. This season 1 Strange New Worlds, off-world jackets they are rocking, freaking dope. I want them. I really do. So CBS Paramount, hook a brother up. So anyway, ion storm sweeping the planet, and predictable Star Trek trope. Oh, we're not able to get out in time. Be warned, it's a coming. So we're going to continue moving through. We have a nameless ensign, one of our first nameless characters of Strange New Worlds. This is Ensign Lance, who is seeing some shiny space dust as he's investigating some random locker with tubes and vials in it. As you can imagine, this will play a key role in the story to come. So I will go ahead. I'm making some kind of tongue-in-cheek references here. Some of the storyline here is pretty predictable if you're a heavy sci-fi fan. To be honest, I had it figured out basically now. I was like, okay, I see exactly what's going to happen here. It makes sense, but it also ties into sci-fi series, former Star Trek episodes, and even going into some other not even Star Trek lore, just Star lore, like Stargate. You'll see what I mean here in a second, as we've got Ensign Lance with an old school flashlight going through tubicles. So moving on, we got Mr. Hemmer here, who we've got and I wanted to include this shot because I love when they do in their close-ups, the amount of detail they're going into the ship. So we've seen them, like the pads have full-on stories and information on them. The windows here that we're seeing, I love that they're including this level of detail in the show, and then we can make screenshots of this and actually study the panels, and you can look at the engine room and how it goes to the nacelles. I just love that level of detail. Even if it's pseudoscience, doesn't matter. And this is when they were rerouting auxiliary power, because that is like one of the most go-to Star Trek. Hey, something's not working, reroute auxiliary power. It was over here like working with the replicators, but now reroute it to the transporters and get our people home. And that's what they're trying to do, get off the planet, because the ion storm is coming. So number 1 and the most of the away team are able to get out. However, Spock and Commander Captain Pike are stuck on the planet. So number one gets everybody beamed off. And yeah, we gotta love that Star Trek armor with the whole auxiliary power thing. But once again, look at the screens in the background, just the level of detail they're going into with all this. I really, really appreciate taking advantage of modern technology and modern, techniques here for storytelling. Really provides a visual that you couldn't have in some previous Star Treks. So Spock's over having a good time reading journals while they're down below, but up here in the ship, things are going kind of awry. We finally see the nameless ensign, who's actually Ensign Lance, banging his head through a glass panel because he wants to embrace the light. Yep, little weird here, kind of a little bit freaky, but hey, this is kind of what happens. So after we've got, down on the planet, we have that nice, Spock and Pike running away from the Ion Storm theme so that he can get back to his perfect library. We get upstairs to the ship where we're looking at Ensign Lance just trying to decapitate himself with busting his face through glass. So that's that's weird. But anyway, the whole focus is to see the light particles. You see he's the one that is on the ship. And we also saw a scene where the number one, Una, shows these symptoms, but then her body starts to kind of like glow red. What's going on here? These people are possessed by like some weird disease, and what's going on with them? So we this is kind of where you can kind of deduce that the Illyrians become energy beings on the planet, and that's why everybody's addicted to light and they're running into the ion storms. It was, like I said, it's kind of more predictable storyline, but it's how they go about it with great character development for multiple characters. Last episode, we really focused on Uhura and getting to know her. In this episode, we're going to have a lot about Dr. M'Benga, a lot about Una, who's number one, but also getting several of these secondary characters. So we're getting into Dr. M'Benga here in sick bay, and we're getting more and more of the crew who are becoming infected. Obviously, the original away team are part of this, but now we've got other people who will start showing symptoms as well. Number one lies and says she hasn't experienced the issues yet. Why would she lie? You'll find out later. We come to find out that the reason everybody's trying to seek out the light is basically they're short on vitamin D. Yes, that's the reason, and I guess it makes sense in the future. Anyway, then we get to number one talking to Engineer Himmer, figure out what's going on. Like, hey, could the transporters have missed something? And Dr. Himmer says transporters can't miss biogens because the transporters would filter out anything that it doesn't recognize. So even if it didn't register that you were a nuisance or a virus or a biological or fungus or anything, it would still remove anything from you in the transporter pattern buffer to make sure that you are who you were coming in. So that kind of makes sense. And that's how number one's like, yo, no problem, but still want you to run a diagnostic. So that turns into him running a diagnostic. Fast forward into the next scene, you've got Khan, who I just like calling her Khan. We finally start getting a little bit of her backstory. She's a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh and everything that happened with the augment. So she's obviously been picked on a lot in her life and has a pretty negative view of the Illyrians because they were a race that thrived on genetic modification. They would go to a planet, instead of terraforming the planet to cater to them, they would cater their genetics to work with the planet that they were trying to inhabit, which I think is a pretty smart and makes sense concept. But number one here is studying classified Illyrian medical records, overriding the computer's security protocols to do so. She obviously has kind of a bit of an issue with this, and you can kind of see this becoming a theme that will work into the episode a little bit later between them and their friendship. And predictable, she gets addicted to the lights. She starts showing symptoms. So here we get more and more people in sickbay. Nurse Chapel, Dr. M'Benga, everybody trying to figure out what the heck is going on. We got to put the ship on a ship-wide lockdown, y'all. We got disease just spreading throughout the ship, and we don't know what to do. Back down on the surface, we got Spock. Says the Illyrians wanted to join the Federation, and we're looking at revising their genetic engineering on this planet to reverse everything just so they could join. I think that's pretty freaking cool. But hey, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And that's kind of what happened here. Like I said, storyline, I'm trying not to give away as we go through it, but I think y'all are all kind of picking up on what I picked on. I will say, as you can see them here, they look like beings in the ion storm flying to Spock and Pike, like, yo, we got to get to him. Yeah, it was kind of predictable. Now we've got an overrun, like absolutely overrun. They had to open up the auxiliary bay for patients. I mean, you basically have the entire ship just kind of going crazy now. And I will say, I got to give a little bit of a shout out to this, where it's almost, I think it was a nod to Lower Decks, because remember, Uhura is a cadet in this one. So she's actually bunking with roomies, but she was in the dark, so she's not affected. But her roommates were addicted to light. You'll see it when you watch the episode. I love that. I think I felt like a real good call out. Then you have M'Benga saying they have to open up the auxiliary rooms. You got Hemmer making these great sarcastic remarks. I love that they're building that into his personality, and I think it's working really well. He's hilarious comedic relief if you're into that sarcasm. I love that he's coming through, also providing a lot of detail. And so, yeah. And then we kind of start learning that Dr. M'Benga is hiding something. The initial hints seem to make it seem like he's infected, but we find out later that he's hiding something a little bit more important than that. Now we've got, first time we see green-blooded Vulcans. We actually have Spock showing a little bit of a cut, bleeding here a little bit, as they're trying to stop the beings from coming into the library with him down on the surface, not understanding that the beings are trying to help them. Which is a very Star Trek thing. They're trying to help everybody, but of course Spock and Pike don't know that. They can't communicate, so they're trying to block the door. Now back up top, Hemmer has become extremely infected to where he is transported, which I actually love this. He's transported a nearby planet's molten mantle into the transporter, and he's trying to stabilize the transport and then be with it. Obviously, it would vaporize him instantly upon touching it, but that's the effect that this disease is having on him, even as an NR, whether you're human. Everybody seems to be getting affected when they're moving up to the planet, wanting to touch the light. Why this is not affecting Pike and Spock, I'm not really sure, but as you can see here, as the ion storm is approaching, the beings, the Illyrians who become this form of energy, protect Spock and Pike from the ion storm as it passes over. Now we get Dr. M'Benga, who is struggling mightily with the disease to the point that he wants to be sedated until something can be fixed, and he basically passes it on over to number one, or Una. Says, hey, you're our final hope, Una One Kenobi. Oh God, that was a terrible pun. That was absolutely awful. In fact, in the comment section right now, if y'all want to trash me for that pun, I will not mind. It was terrible, but to be honest, I actually loved it because I'm a nerd and I thought it was fantastic. But he's still hiding something. Then we get down to Spock again, where the beings protected Spock, and we're finding out more as the story progresses that, hey, Spock notes, look, there's two options here. Either the beings eradicated the Illyrians, or the beings from the Ion Storm are in fact the Illyrians. So they're starting to put two and two together as we learn a secret about number one, that she is in fact an Illyrian. And that is how she's able to resist this disease. Her genetic structure that has been augmented to make her stronger, faster. I mean, she's actually carrying Khan here to sickbay, like over her shoulder in a previous scene. So, you're starting to see this, like, how are you so strong? How are you able to overcome this disease? She is genetically modified. She's essentially like an augment from Earth to an extent, but an Illyrian, which is the theme here. We're talking about, hey, as we get deeper into this, we talk about the Federation trying to get rid of old racisms and stuff, only to bring in new ones because of fear. And that's part of the greater storytelling in this show, where in this episode we're talking about the inability to accept others, fighting off and talking about racism and how we accept people who are different than us yet still the same. One of the things about the Illyrians they talk about in Enterprise is that they can look very different structurally, or they can look exactly like humans based on whatever planet they were colonizing, and thus changing themselves to match that planet. So Una here looks exactly like a human, but is in fact an Illyrian. Obviously, that's illegal. Like, they would never have been allowed to join Starfleet. They're not in the Federation because of how the Federation fears Illyrians and genetic modifications, that form of xenophobia that this episode starts to focus around. And then we get to, as we progress through, we learn Dr. M'Benga's secret. Why was this happening? So we find out that it's actually M'Benga's fault that everybody who came aboard the ship was not cleaned. The reason being, the medical transporter had not been updated in space dock because Dr. M'Benga was hiding something. He was hiding a pattern in the transporter pattern buffer, which is why he did not allow the engineering teams at dock to fix and update the new transporters that would have prevented this disease, because we come to find out he's hiding his daughter who's dying from an incurable disease. hiding her, basically making her immortal while in the transporter pattern buffer until he can find the cure that he needs. It's extremely touching as a parent. Not gonna lie, kind of choked me up a little bit. I was like, holy crap, that is not only amazing and emotional, but incredibly touching. And he basically tries to resign. It's hilarious. Una tries to turn herself over to Pike and says, look, I'm an Illyrian. I've lied to get into Starfleet. I did all these things. Turn me in, court-martial me. I'll accept my punishment. And Pike says, no, definitely not going to do that. You saved the crew, and you're a great example of why the Federation shouldn't be fearing that which it does not understand. Getting into the great overall message, not only getting incredible character development, but we're also getting that overall theme that Star Trek always tries to do. Find a negative into a positive. What is something that society is doing, a social construct that we've created that we need to grow and progress from? Star Trek has always tried to be these themes of progression, these themes of improvement on our own society. That's a great example of that here in this episode, using the Illyrians as an example. And Dr. Mbenga also gets to this point, talking to Una, hey, I'll turn myself over because of what I did that almost eradicated the entire crew of the Enterprise. And instead, she says, actually, what we're going to do, we're going to devote an entire section of the power from the warp core. That way this never happens again. We can update the transporters, but also store your daughter in the pattern buffer. And in the final scene, you get this great storytelling where he's, rematerializes his daughter in a med bed, in a bio bed, and he's reading her story before he puts her back in the pattern buffer, which is just absolutely fantastic. It's an extremely emotional episode, very tender episode that had that feeling of who could die here in the characters. I mean, obviously some of the main characters we know can't die. That's gonna be a difficulty that Strange New Worlds faces, is how does it, approach death? Well, we know Pike can't die because he's got to be in the original series. We know that, Samuel T. Kirk can't die because he dies in the original series. We know that Spock can't die here. So how's it going to handle all these things while still giving that feeling of danger and doing it with some of these other characters here in the show, and also providing depth to all these characters? So I actually love the development here. This was a fantastic episode. 3 episodes in a row that I'm rating like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for Star Trek. And if you are just a sci-fi fan, you absolutely love it. I want to know what you think in the comment section down below. These videos are running a little bit long. I apologize, but it's that level of story. There's so much storytelling. There's so many callbacks to other Star Trek. We got to give love to it. And finally, if you enjoyed it, smash the like button. Looks like a big thumb. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the little bell to know every time I go live, every time content gets released here on the channel. Deuces, that's me. I'm going to catch you on the next one. Live long and prosper. Stay safe with our space cowboys. We love Star Trek. Hopefully, we love it all together.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.